Ladies and gentlemen, this is Nate Crespo, your host for today and forever, and welcome back to another episode of the Lawyers in the Making podcast, where it is my job to focus on the unique journeys to the law and law school of professionals in the legal field and law students. Let's talk about what we're doing today, because today we have another incredible guest. He's a Boston College Law School graduate and currently works as a director of legal in Evangelist and advisor, board member at Proxy. Now, I forgot Malbek is the company of the first part that you actually worked at. I forgot that part. But he has held past positions as a director of marketing and business development at WordRake and as legal counsel at Lookout. And finally, he is the author of The Legal Tech Ecosystem, which will be linked below. But the one, the only, Mr. Colin Levy. Welcome to the podcast. How are we doing today?
Before going any further, I'd like to say a quick word about the sponsor of this podcast, Rhetoric. Back in episode 25, I had the privilege of having the CEO, Luke Yingling, on the podcast, and ever since that episode, fell in love with the product. Rhetoric takes user briefs and motions and compares them against the text of opinions written by judges to identify ways to tailor their arguments to better persuade the judges handling their cases. Rhetoric's focus on persuasion and helps users find new ways to improve their odds of success through more persuasive arguments. Know more, win more. I was able to see a demo of the product, and its cutting-edge technology and fascinating features make for a product I am proud to sponsor, and further shows the new digital era the field of law has been entering thus far on my journey doing this podcast. If you decide to book a demo, let them know Nate sent you. Be sure to check them out in the show notes below or at userhetoric.com. One word, userhetoric.com. Now, back to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, I'm doing well. It's Friday. It's beautiful. No complaints.
Oh, no complaints at all as well over here, Colin. I'm just as excited to have you here today. But before we get started, Colin, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am a lawyer by background, primarily in-house, meaning I've worked for a variety of different companies, ranging from manufacturing to tech companies. And I've always had an interest in technology, which I think in part led to me exploring this intersection of tech and law. On that, I think interest first became clear to me when I actually, prior to law school, was working in New York City for a law firm as a paralegal, creating e-discovery databases, and saw these tools being used to help lawyers do their jobs, and thought, this is interesting. Surely there are other people that are interested in this sort of intersection of technology and law. So fast forward, go through law school, very little talked about there in terms of technology. I graduate, start working, and think to myself, why is legal seemingly acting as if the world still lives in the 1940s and not the 2000s or what have you? And so I took it upon myself to start talking with others who thought that same way, and were trying to do things about it, whether through creating products, whether teaching law students about technology, or through working at companies that were trying to actually sell technologies to lawyers or legal professionals. And so those conversations really set me off on this journey of learning about the intersection of tech and law. And as I learned more, I started sharing more of what I was learning online, which then led to more conversations and led to me just being a part in developing the legal tech community. And it's just been really a wonderful journey ever since.
Well, I cannot wait to dive into that journey that you were speaking of. But let's go back, all the way back. Wonderful year, 2006. You graduate from Trinity College in Hartford with a public policy and law economic policy degree. A lot of words there. But that same year, you actually, like you said, you were an intern, a technical litigation support analyst at Kravitz, Swine, and more. So I want to ask that question first. Before you got into Boston College Law School, how valuable was getting that early experience, that early legal experience before heading off to law school?
Yeah, I mean, before I always knew I wanted to get some work experience in before law school because I've been told, and that became abundantly clear when I started law school, that law school is not college 2.0. It's a lot harder and there's a lot of different stress involved. So I wanted to get some work experience in to kind of understand how the working world actually worked. So I decided to, paralegal seemed like a natural place for me to get that experience. So started applying for paralegal jobs. Cravath is one of the oldest and perhaps most well-known law firms in the world. I didn't necessarily know that at the time, but I was told that when I was applying. And so I got a job there, figured, okay, this probably makes sense as a place for me to work. And it was an eye-opening experience in terms of not just the work I was doing, but the organization I was a part of, the lawyers that worked there, just sort of all of it was really just a completely, in some ways, a jarring experience for me, but really opened my eyes to sort of the practice of law and also to big law life and law firm life, which in turn told me that that was not what I wanted to do when I graduated from law school. But nevertheless, working at Cravath really was a good experience for me to learn about myself, for me to learn again about technology and how it could be used to help lawyers do their jobs better and help clients be better served. And overall, it was really a very good learning experience. It was probably one of the hardest experiences I've had in my life, but it was definitely interesting. I'd say it was difficult, not necessarily due to the work itself per se, although that could be at times a little challenging, but just managing a lot of really challenging personalities. That was probably the biggest hurdle for me to overcome and deal with because go from college to working for this very storied law firm, and it's a very it's an interesting juxtaposition. And you move out of your dorm and you go to this huge city you never lived in before, and yeah, it was a lot of new experiences at once. I wouldn't necessarily want to go through it again, but at the same time, I'm glad that I had the experience that I did because I think in part it helped me set me off on the path that I ended up taking post law school.
So before ending up in 2007 at Boston College Law School, simply put, Colin, why'd you go to law school?
Yeah, well, I had always in my mind, I think, as a student, an interest in the law, and because I saw the law and the practice of law as sort of a puzzle solver. You're putting together different pieces and figuring out how they all fit together in sort of a systematic and kind of um, structured way. And so law school was intriguing to me because of that. It also intrigued me because it brought together all these different disciplines because the law touches all these different industries, and I thought that was pretty intriguing. So overall, that was kind of what drew me to law school. And yeah, my experience in New York didn't kind of dissuade me from going to law school, although it definitely kind of gave me a sense of a little bit of what I was signing up for potentially. But it really was something that was important to me because I liked the law and I just kind of wanted to see what practicing law was like. I have many lawyers in my family, but it wasn't necessarily them being lawyers that compelled me to go. It was in part just my academic interest and my desire to challenge myself and really just kind of bring together all these different interests I had in technology and law and kind of exposure to how business operates. And so I decided to go for it.
Yeah, the sort of puzzle piece view, sort of figuring things out, the intellectual stimulation per se of going into law school, going into the legal field. That is a constant theme of this podcast. People always talk about that, how the work that they do is very much very, very intellectual stimulating. But let's go to the first year of law school. People love it, people hate it. Colin, how is it for you?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
I absolutely can. So, the first year of law school at Boston College Law School, how was that for you? People love it, people hate it, but how was it for you?
It was fine. There were a number of people that dropped out of law school after the first year because law school is the type of place that kind of can, eat you alive if you let it. So I found the first year to be more or less fine. It was a little frustrating in some ways because I felt very confined in terms of what I could study because you're prescribed kind of certain courses. I also found it a little silly in that, your first year grades, if you want to work in for a law firm, count for so much. And I'm like thinking to myself, this is really silly because, I would not hire someone based off of how well they're doing after 1 year of law school. But then I realized they're also looking at it from a perspective of, can we teach this person? Because law firms do a lot of teaching of how to be a lawyer, which ironically is not necessarily the job that law schools do the best job of doing. Um, so that's another part of it. But I knew I didn't want to work for a law firm, so I wasn't necessarily overly concerned about my grades, but there certainly were a lot of people who were. And I found that to be pretty divisive, created a lot of contrived competition, and I think led to some unhealthy behaviors in terms of studying, in terms of trying to always one up someone else. So that was tough to see, but nevertheless I persevered, and I'm glad I did for a variety of reasons. But another point I would make is that during the first year, a lot of people entered law school with significant others, boyfriends, girlfriends, whomever, and law school for the most part destroyed most of those relationships, and did a pretty good job of it actually. And I'm not surprised because it really is this very weird world you are in, and it doesn't necessarily permit you a lot of time outside of it. I made a concerted effort to make time outside of it and ended up, benefiting quite a bit from having done so. But certainly, it was hard to do so and was certainly seen as sort of abnormal in some ways.
So in being in such a high intensity environment, such as law school, all the competition, all the grades, there's so much going on, people having problems outside of it, there's all this noise. What are some ways that you blocked out this noise and just focused on yourself, focused on the people around you, and were able to do what you were able to do throughout law school?
Yeah, so there are a couple things that I think I benefited from. One is I lived close by to the law school, so that meant that I didn't have to actually study at the law school, which a lot of people did, but I did not to the extent to which I could, because it wasn't a great environment for me. Even the library was not a great environment for me. So I just went to my local town library, like to study for exams. So that was helpful. Um, in addition, and this kind of resulted from, I think, me um, meeting my now husband after my first year of law school. He had an apartment that I moved into that was close by to the law school, and so we met after my first year of law school, and he put up with me for the rest of law school, and I moved into his place, and that also gave me sort of a happy place to kind of do work and focus on myself and not be surrounded by these people that were in some ways acting a little insane. So that was particularly beneficial. But to my earlier point about relationships in law school, doing a good job of destroying those relationships. Um, for some reason or another, we survived and thrived through it and afterwards. So that was good, and I think it was helpful for me to have someone else that kind of who wasn't in law school, who I could kind of just rely on as a source of support, because they saw things through a different lens that I couldn't necessarily see things through because I was so embedded in the law school mindset and environment. And that was particularly helpful for me to be able to take time for myself, to sort of take time away from work and really focus on just being happy and making sure I was focusing on my physical and mental health.
Yeah, I think that's very important sentiment to put out there to ensure that you're happy, that you're not putting all your energy into all your work. Because, like you said, law school does a great job to destroy the relationships around you if you don't handle them in the right way. And of course, I'm always late to the congratulations, but congratulations to having a very nice husband. I'd love to hear that. I'd love to have a significant other myself one day. But something you had noted before when you were talking about the position that you had before going to law school, that in working in that job, you found out that, okay, maybe the big law environment isn't for me. And throughout law school, you had a summer associate at Chew, Ring, and Hazel. You were also a legal intern at the Rhode Island Supreme Court. So, can you talk about those experiences and how you sort of found out what you wanted to do, but more importantly, what you didn't want to do with the law?
Yeah, so those summer experiences, I think, really informed kind of the path I would take because they gave me exposure to different parts of the law. For example, Shubert and Hazel, small law firm, which I liked because it was a small law firm, but it felt more in some ways like working in a house because I was working with a select few clients that I got to know. So that was a really good experience to kind of give me a sense of, yeah, I think the in-house, smaller, if I was going to work for a firm, a smaller firm was where I wanted to be. So that made more sense as well. And then working for the Rhode Island Supreme Court, that was really informative to me because it gave me exposure to the court system, which I didn't really know a whole lot about. I didn't necessarily know if I wanted to be that type of lawyer or not, i.e. be a litigator. I learned that I didn't want to be, but the whole kind of behind the scenes working for the court, working for a justice of the court was really pretty interesting and fascinating, really opened my eyes up to sort of the variety of different matters that come before a court, especially at that level. And that was really sort of eye-opening and exciting for me and informative. It gave me exposure, it gave me some more knowledge to go forward with. At the same time, I also knew that that was not necessarily, I didn't want to do litigation. I was not that type of person. I didn't have that type of mindset. So that was not something I wanted to do. But it was really quite interesting and definitely pretty invaluable to have because I am a big believer in having a variety of experiences to have as broad a perspective as possible because we're always learning. Learning never stops regardless how old you are. And so I found that having that variety of experiences earlier in my career allowed them for me to kind of better understand what worked for me, what didn't work for me, and the type of work I wanted to be doing and how and where.
Yeah, I think that's so important because it just goes to that point of if you don't know if you like it or not, well, you just got to try it, I guess. And usually through that, they're actually making some action, they're doing the work. You can figure out if it's right for you or not. That's always been a theme of this podcast from pretty much every guest I've ever had on here. But now we go beyond law school. You had your first job in the real world. You were a contract attorney at Update Legal and you jumped around a lot. Now, I want to make a bold prediction before we go into the rest of your experiences, because whenever I see when people are jumping around from job to job, they're always master networkers. They always, always are. The first time I ever did this was episode 10 with Dan Cotter. He had so many different positions that he did, but every single position looking backwards were connected in some way, shape, or form. So I hope that prediction comes true as we begin speaking about this. But can you first talk about your first real world experience working as a contract attorney at Update Legal?
Yeah, so let me give a little bit of context to kind of those roles before I joined Velcro. So all those roles were temporary roles, and the reason why they were temporary is because when I graduated from law school, this was 2010. So we were just exiting kind of the Great Recession, if you will. So the economy wasn't great. There weren't a lot of jobs available. And I didn't have any experience and I didn't want to work for a firm. So because I wanted to work in-house and didn't have a whole lot of experience, my options were pretty limited. So what I needed to do was, as a practical matter, I needed to get experience. And the only way I was going to be able to do that was really to get temporary work. So that's what I went about doing. So I worked with a variety of different contract attorney agencies, including Update Legal, to get experience in different areas of law that pertain to in-house practice. So contract review, contract administration, document review, and all those different experiences gave me essential skills that then I was able to then take forward and talk about when I was applying for the role with Velcro. And so that was how I was able to get my first full-time role, was through these temporary roles. And at the same time, to your earlier prediction, you're absolutely right. I did really learn to love networking and connecting with others. I always did love to connect with others. I just didn't necessarily view it as networking per se. And I don't necessarily like that word either. But regardless, I became really good at building a community around myself and building people around myself to know, to talk to learn from. And really, I've continued to with that effort every step of the way. And that has helped me gain experience, gain opportunities, and get exposure and learn about opportunities I didn't even know existed because other people knew what I was interested in, therefore would bring opportunities to me. And that's one of the benefits of being devoted networker, community builder, is being connected with others and therefore them being aware that of what you're doing and bringing potential opportunities to your door that you perhaps weren't aware of. So all that experience at the time was a little jarring because it was not necessarily what I had in mind when I graduated from law school, but nevertheless, it really allowed me to get set on the right path going forward in terms of working in-house and then learning more about technology and how technology could kind of help actually change my career trajectory in terms of moving ever more closely towards the tech side of the world as opposed to the more purely legal side of the world.
Yeah, I love that answer immensely, just for the pure point that it does always have to do with the tagline of this podcast. So there is no straight path. There's only your unique journey. So the fact that you had to spend a year or two doing contracts just to get your feet wet, just to meet some people, get your name out there in the world, just further shows that, it's not all straight. It's all up and down, all over the place. You
Oh
gotta
yeah, yeah.
get different
There's no
places.
straight line anywhere. And anyone who tells you that, you probably shouldn't listen to them.
But I have to ask, you tipped me off on something and I gotta know why. But you said you don't like the word networking. Would you rather a different word? Like what's your thought process behind that?
Yeah, so networking, I think, to me, has connotations of being sort of a cold, sort of one-off action where you kind of talk to someone and they then become part of your network and you go forward. And so I don't really think I don't really see networking as that way. I see it more as, I see networking more as community building, meaning you are connecting with others, learning from them, and then them becoming a part of your community and you becoming a part of their community. And so, and that means that you're building long-term relationships with others. And that's really how you benefit the most from sort of networking as it is through engaging with others, listening more than talking, and maintaining these relationships over an extended period of time. And I really wish that more folks, when they talk about networking and emphasize it to people looking for roles or emphasize it to people looking for just opportunities, what have you, to emphasize sort of the relationship building aspect of it, because that's the real value of it, as opposed to just sort of talking to someone one time and moving on from them. That doesn't really help anyone. You become forgettable to them and vice versa. And so it's as if you never had a conversation in the first place. And so I really think the most amount of sort of value from networking comes from putting in a lot of effort to build that relationship over time and really to devote yourself to getting to know folks and getting to understand them and listen to them and learning from their experience and both through what they're telling you and what they're not telling you, because I often think that communication is more than just what people say to you.
Yeah, well, Colin, I always love a good reframe, and that was a very good one in my mind because it goes more towards the community building, the relationship building, sort of having a message when you're going out there and doing the networking per se, and sort of gathering around on this one idea or one concept. For you, it will probably be legal tech, where a lot of the people you're networking with are interested in that same kind of field, that same kind of topic, and that's how you sort of build out those relationships. So I always love that. But you said something before, you talk about value within a relationship, but I just want to talk about value on its own. And I always love asking these questions because I love to see the varying perspectives people may have. But what would you describe that value is, just plainly in your own words? And how would you give value to someone right now in the current position that you're in as the director of legal and evangelist at Malbek?
Yeah, so I think the way you bring value and show value and give value is through a variety of ways. One is through just being there for others, showing support, listening to them, being responsive to their needs. If they have a question, if they, just want to run something by you, just being open to that and allowing yourself to hear what they have to say and listen carefully and not immediately think about what you're going to say after they're done, but really just listen carefully what they have to say. I also think that value comes through really kind of meeting the needs of where you work. And what that means is, first of all, understanding where you work, kind of the business, what they value, what they're concerned about, and what they're thinking about now, what they're thinking about in the future, and tailoring kind of how you work to kind of what the business is thinking and align with in terms of what they're selling and doing and so on. And then lastly, I think really value comes from just being someone who is able to learn and adapt and just always kind of being a resource for others, whether it's providing information, providing support, just being a listening ear, just reviewing something for someone, just really kind of being someone who others can know they can turn to as someone who's going to be reliable, someone who's going to, always provide some input and have insightful things to say and so on. And I think you kind of learn to be that way through working and understand that when you're in a business, you're part of a team. And so you really have to kind of think as part, not as just an individual contributor, but really think as part of a larger group of people all trying to achieve the same thing and move the boat in the same direction. And quite frankly, that starts with, as I alluded to earlier, really understanding kind of what boat you're a part of, what that means, who make up that group that you're a part of, what they do, how they work with one another, and so on. And that doesn't happen overnight, but it happens over time as you get to know a place and get to learn from others and learn kind of how they work and so on. So that's really how I view value. So it's kind of a multifaceted thing that sort of is an effort that requires you to be engaged in a variety of different ways.
So we're flying around in time here. I'm going all the way back to 2016. You were at Pearson, and I only wanted to. This is like such a self-interested question because I know Pearson used to make like my math books or something in elementary school. So what did you do there for the 2 years that you were there as the manager of contract negotiations?
Yeah, absolutely. So Pearson was a really, actually, I love my time there. It was a wonderful place to work. And yeah, they made a bunch of textbooks that I had in high school and in college as well. So my role there was interesting in that I was tasked with managing sort of negotiations for contracts pertaining to different types of content that Pearson wants to use in their publications, whether they were print publications or digital publications. In addition to that, also, acquiring associated intellectual property rights and also responding to various inquiries from various business units with respect to IP rights pertaining to different types of content. And it was really an interesting place to work because at the time it was undergoing this really challenging but really vital transformation from a more traditional print publisher to a digital company. And sort of being part of that transition was really interesting to me from both a professional as well as a personal perspective as someone who was deeply interested in this link between tech and law and technology's impact upon not just different areas of law, but different areas of business as well. So that role was really wonderful. And it was really eye-opening for me and being part of such a huge organization with a variety of different responsibilities that were very varied and dealing with a variety of different teams from across the globe. It really was quite the experience, and I really enjoyed my time there and definitely gave me a lot of experience and skills that I rely on every day now.
Now, after that, Corporate Counsel at salary.com. What is salary.com?
So Salary.com is a software company that provides software with respect to people's salaries and compensation. So it was an interesting company to work for, definitely at the intersection of tech and business. And while there, I was their one and only lawyer. I was effectively their general counsel, and it was really quite an interesting role to have to be part of. It was my first time working for a smaller company as the only lawyer, and that's in part why I took on the role, and also moved me ever closer to being in tech because it really was sort of a tech company in many ways. So it was really a great role to have, and really again provided me with a lot of skills and experience that I now rely on every day going forward. And it was quite an experience and quite just a journey for me learning about myself and my true capabilities because there was no one else for me to rely on. It was just me. And so that was really interesting for me to be in that type of role, which is similar to the role I have now in many ways, because I'm the only lawyer from, I'm the chief lawyer from Malbek, and there's really just me. So it's just an interesting to see how far I've come from that role to where I am now.
Well, I always love to throw myself in the fires and the flames and see how I do. So clearly, you're succeeding in the fires and the flames. And let's talk about the success you have right now, because you are the director of legal and evangelist at Malbek. So what do you do there? What's your day-to-day like? Tell us all about it.
Absolutely. So it's an interesting role in that I am, as I said before, effectively their chief lawyer. So I handle contracts, data privacy, IP, deal with some employment issues as well. Anything that comes up really. So kind of, jack of all trades in terms of being the lawyer for Malbec. But the evangelist part of it is sort of ties into some of what I do have been doing already online on LinkedIn and elsewhere, where I produce content talking about legal tech, talking about contract management, being on webinars, participating on podcasts, speaking and attending conferences, really just helping educate others about contracting, contract management, legal tech, and all of that. So it's really kind of an interesting role that I have, because there's a variety of things that I do. I do lawyer stuff, but I also do a fair amount of content stuff and writing and speaking and assisting with marketing and sales efforts. So it's really kind of a fun role, because I'm able to do a lot of different things. No day is the same. And all the things that I'm doing are things that I enjoy doing and would want to do anyway. So it's kind of a really beneficial role. I'm giving a fair degree of autonomy as well. So it's really kind of just this great position that I am in, where I'm able to kind of do things I enjoy, but are things that are helping Malbec as well as helping me.
Yeah, you said my favorite words there, Colin. No days are the same. And that's such a magical thing to hear, when you can live a different day every single day, do different work every single day. It's an amazing thing. It's a goal of mine. I hope it's a goal of everyone to reach in their life. But you are also the author of the Legal Tech Ecosystem. So can you tell us a little bit about that book? And what are some takeaways people should take away from the book itself?
Absolutely. So, Legal Tech Ecosystem is a 3-year effort that I was engaged in. Came out last October, and it's really intended to be a high-level, accessible introduction to the world of legal tech for those who perhaps have not familiar with it, or are somewhat familiar with it, but really don't kind of understand some of the things that are done in this space. That's the goal of the book. So it's really intended for those to kind of for those wanting to learn more about the space, but aren't seeking for a really technical introduction to it, because there are plenty of books that are like that as well. This is not it. It's really intended to help you learn about the space as told by those who work in the space, because I feature quotes from a lot of folks I have spoken with and interviewed, talking about their experience and lessons learned. And so I think some of the takeaways from the book include, the fact that legal tech is not just one thing. It's many, many different things that impacts a whole range of spaces within law, ranging from litigation to legal research to patents to IP to contracts and everything in between. I think another takeaway from the book is that legal tech is not just for those who have some technical background. It really is accessible for everyone. And there's a place in it for everyone. So you don't have to be some kind of tech guru to benefit from it or being a part of it. And then the third takeaway, I think, is the fact that legal tech is evolving and it's dynamic, and there's always more things going on. It's not a very quiet space. There's always a lot to learn from, a lot to keep track of, a lot to stay on top of, and that can be very invigorating and exciting for people. And this book is intended to not just bring that excitement, but also to help sort of alleviate people's sense of overwhelm when they first hear about legal tech and think about all the different areas that it touches.
So I'd like to talk about your LinkedIn. Now, you have amassed a lot of followers. I believe from checking this morning, you're at 33,000 followers. That is a lot. Congratulations on that. I hope to have 33 followers one day. 30, not 33, 33,000. That's a lot more than 33. But what is the type of content you post on there? And I forgot to say this, but for everyone listening, wondering where's Colin's book? It's in the description below. Don't you worry about it. But in making where did your LinkedIn content journey sort of start? Why did you start posting on LinkedIn, and what are the types of things you do post on LinkedIn?
So LinkedIn is an interesting platform. I love it. I can't get enough of it, but it really stems from my desire to interact and learn from others. So I first started using LinkedIn primarily as a means of helping kind of show who I was and with the hope of potentially finding job opportunities. So I view it initially as a way to find myself potentially some job opportunities. And then it transformed into this platform for me to showcase and build my personal brand, which in turn has helped me garner even more opportunities and more connections with others. And that started from really not even posting content, but really just engaging with other people's content through commenting and likes. And that's how I suggest a lot of people get started on LinkedIn if they aren't on the platform or don't use it that much, because it can be a little intimidating to, do your first full-blown post. So rather than do that, what I did was I just started commenting on other people's posts, sharing some thoughts, engaging with them. And then those comments and discussions I was having in the threads to people's posts that inspired me to start posting myself. And most of my posts tend to focus on a few things. They focus on learning about legal tech, what it is, what it isn't, what's going on in the space, different areas within it, such as generative AI or AI more generally, or legal research or legal litigation analytics. And then I also talk about, and this is something that's near and dear to my heart as well, mental health and really taking care of yourself, because I have myself struggled with mental health at times. And I think it's important to normalize the conversation around mental health and help show other people that mental health is just as vital and important for your overall health as your physical health is. And the best way to do that is, in my view, to help show other people they're not alone in their struggles, that other people are struggling as well. And it's okay and important to talk about it. And if you need help, to seek out such help.
Law students, are you feeling overwhelmed, stressed, or short on time in law school? Maybe you just want someone to show you a step-by-step framework to master the topics you're learning in your classes. I know the pressure you're under, and I've got the perfect solution for you. My course, The Law School Operating System, is proven to help you conquer law school with confidence and ease.
Created by Lisa Blasser, a former guest on the podcast and founder of the Law School Success Institute, this course breaks down every subject into manageable main topics that you run through a comprehensive study system to thoroughly prepare you for class and final exams. No more feeling like you need to know everything all at once in the beginning.
But that's not all, Nate. The Law School Operating System also teaches you how to schedule your studying and time effectively. For every topic, you'll know which study step you're on and when you'll complete it every week of your semester. No more mad dash cram sessions, more time with your loved ones. And with my system, you'll walk into your exams knowing you've given 100% of yourself, that there's nothing more you could have done to succeed, and there's no better confidence than that.
Lisa breaks it down like this: one class, one list of main topics, and one system to master each topic. With recorded and live sessions for students available on her website and partnerships with law schools nationwide, the Law School Operating System is here to help you thrive from day one to the final exam. Ready to take control of your law school journey and operate at your full potential in law school? Visit www.lisablasser.com today and enroll in the Law School Operating System. Be sure to use code LSOSNATE10 at checkout for 10% off the recorded course. That is code LSOSNATE10 at checkout. Now, back to the show. Of course, listen, I could not agree more. Some of my favorite podcasts of all time, an article I actually posted the other day, most of them leave people, left myself, in tears, just for the pure fact that it was these very prominent, even someone like Tim Ferriss, the GOAT of podcasting, had such tremendous mental health struggles, and he speaks about it very candidly. And it's just so important for the people to speak out about it, to talk about their struggles they've been through, just like yourself. I saw your post. I was touched by it. I was moved by it. And I have to thank you for the raw honesty that you put out there in the world, because it really is just that important. Because, like you said, someone could be in a similar spot that you were in, see that you posted and be inspired to be like, hey, listen, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one in this. Because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. But Colin, we're down to our last 5 questions. And the first of the 5 questions is such a great question for you. It is almost like this question is meant for you. But throughout my entire
time doing this podcast. Like you said, the legal industry is moving in a certain way. The legal tech ecosystem is growing and growing by the day. So, Colin, what is your tech stack and what sort of recommendations for people would you have in terms of products of AI software products or just generative AI that you would suggest to people to cut that overhead, be more efficient, anything like that?
Yeah, so there's a variety of tools out there that I think can be helpful. And in general, I think that the right tool for a certain someone depends on kind of their needs, but there are a variety of groups of tools that I think are important to kind of keep in mind. One set of tools are what I would call workflow tools that can help you kind of manage your workflow, manage tasks, manage matters, because lawyers in general don't tend to be great administrators and managing their own work. So there are a bunch of tools out there that can help with that, depending on what your needs are. For law firms, and essentially for legal departments as well. For the sake of full disclosure, I serve on the advisory board of this company called Proxy. It really is aimed at helping folks manage matters and understand who's working on what and assigning matters and understanding the status of all of that, which can be very helpful and also allow you to avoid that time-consuming task of sort of emailing and getting an update on what's going on with a certain matter. There also was other tools as well can help with that, sort of on a more broader sort of legal operations scale. Bright Flag is one of those companies that helps legal departments kind of really manage their sort of legal operations function in terms of billing, matter management, vendor management, tools, etc. Clio is another one that can help handle a variety of different things similar to Bright Flag in some ways, and aimed for both large and small law firms, whereas Bright Flag is more aimed at legal departments. There also are, to generative AI, I use a variety of generative AI tools. I think that they're all useful for different ways. I think there are ones more attuned for legal purposes, such as Vincent or Harvey, which has been mentioned in the news recently, which I know many law firms use. I can't speak to its utility myself, but I know that a lot of law firms have used it. There also are others as well. So, my point here is that I'm not going to, avoid answering your question, but I'm also not going to suggest necessarily any specific tool per se, only because there's a variety of them out there. And I think you need to learn about kind of what your needs are and explore these different areas and figure out what tool best works for you. But understand that there are tools in the workflow space, there are tools in the legal research space, there are tools in the analytics space, there are tools in the IP management space. So there are tools in all these different spaces, but it really is up to you to figure out exactly what tool works best for your needs. And that starts with understanding kind of what your needs are and what your current challenges are.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. The ecosystem is larger than people could possibly believe, but you just got to take that step into it, start finding the things that work for you. And those are the products that are going to help you become more efficient, just like you said. But fourth to last question here, Colin, live on the Lawyers in the Making podcast. Colin, what are your book recommendations for people? Doesn't have to be about the law. You can recommend your own book if you want, but something to give a gift to someone.
Yeah, I think, sure, if you want to learn about legal tech, yeah, read my book. But I think that in terms of books to read, this is going to actually sound kind of funny, but one of my favorite books of all time, and this is a book from my childhood, is called Where the Wild Things Are. And it really is a book that kind of is about, in many ways, kind of understanding yourself and being resilient and being really unafraid to kind of just go for it. And that's why that book has sort of meant so much to me. So even though it's from my childhood and it's definitely a childhood book, I think that its lesson rings true to this day for regardless of your age and who you are and background. It really is just, I think, important to understand that you should not be afraid of really going for it and understand that you're more resilient than you think you are.
Yeah, I have to agree that those books are usually my favorite because they're shorter, they're easy to get through, and they have life lessons that can just take you for eternities and eternities and be valuable for the rest of your life. Of one of those books like that, The Alchemist, which I never read before. I had a lot of my friends who read it in high school, so I was like a little pushed back from them, like, oh, they read it in high school, it's probably not that good then. I got to read it myself. And it honestly is my second favorite book ever. I could read that all day long, just like Where the Wild Things Are. It's just so simple, just so simplistic. The message is so simplistic. I can't get enough of it. But third to last question here, Colin. What are the sorts of things that you consume, not food, on a daily basis? Either that be through social media, so Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Substack, YouTube, Facebook, Reddit, any podcasts you listen to that you like, any people on LinkedIn that you would recommend? What is crossing the transom of Colin's mind on a daily basis?
Sure. So I actually posted on LinkedIn a resource about uh, finding legal tech resources, and that actually describes a lot of kind of the podcasts and books that I follow. But to name a few, I mean, Technically Legal is a podcast that I like quite a bit. Um, Websites, they include things like Above the Law, Artificial Lawyer, Law Next. Um, I'd say that in terms of in 10 things you need to know as an in-house lawyer, in terms of other resources, there's just so many out there. I will, promote a little bit my personal website, colinsLevy.com. I feature a variety of long-form guest posts as well as interviews of legal leaders, so please check it out. That's colinsLevy.com.
In the
Uh,
description.
and stay tuned for a brief little refresh of the site. So yeah, I mean, I would check out kind of what I've listed on LinkedIn really, because that's sort of a good list of different resources and things that I pay attention to. But my one piece of advice with respect to kind of learning and exploring is, listen to yourself, know what speaks to you, know what resonates with you, and double down on what resonates and go for it. Because usually what you are telling yourself in terms of what is driving you, what you're passionate about, is something worth pursuing.
Always, always, always. The truth will set you free. As I know very well, you look inside and then you bring it out. Such a wonderful thing. But second to last question here, Colin. What does a typical, or sorry, not typical, but an ideal Friday night and Sunday morning look for Colin?
So Friday night usually revolves around typically Chinese food and watching some brainless TV for the most part, unless there's tennis on TV because I'm a huge tennis fan, so I will watch tennis if it's on. Um, Sunday usually revolves around just kind of unwinding, perhaps going out for a drive around town a little bit, and just generally relaxing, um, and ensuring that the cats are happy at home.
How many cats do you have?
Two.
Oh, what are their names?
Lexi and Zoe, they tolerate one another, even though they're sisters. Um, the smaller one of the two, Lexi, he basically acts like Napoleon in a cat's body. Zoe, the larger of the two, she is just very friendly, total love bug, but afraid of everything. Um, whereas Lexi is kind of, hunt first, kill first, ask questions later.
The polar opposite cats. Well, I love to hear that. And in terms of brainless TV, what are some of your brainless TV? I'm always looking for recommendations.
So I tend to, gravitate towards horror movies for the most part. So I tend to watch a fair amount of horror, whether they're shows or movies. Uh, I will not mention the one I just watched because it's horrendously just disturbing and gross and awful. All still entertaining, but I'm not going to mention because it's a lot even for me. Um, but movies that I have watched in the past that I've enjoyed include, the Saw franchise, Hellraiser. um, although one of my favorite horror movies actually is one that really isn't even a horror movie. It's more about kind of um, other things. I don't want to spoil it, but it's called The Babadook, and it's ostensibly about this kind of creature that haunts these people, but it's way more than that. But that one I would highly recommend because it's not that gory. It's a little scary, but it's not gory, but it's very, very meaningful. And that one, it's not a brainless movie, but that one would be a good watch for people if you're in the mood. But you'll probably be left at the end fairly sad, actually.
Well, I love The Shining. That will always be my favorite horror movie. I think it's just beautifully done. It's like one of the best well done movies I've ever seen in my life. And Jack Nicholson is, of course, unbelievable in the role that he plays. I just can't get enough of it. I've seen it so many times, but
Oh yeah.
I only watched it very, very recently, but I've watched it so many times. It's just, I can't get enough of it. I think the way that it's filmed, the setting itself, like it just, it's just makes me feel great. It's like my brain feels great watching that movie. But Colin, final question here. I do this at the end of every single episode. Colin, what are your words of wisdom for the aspiring law students, the current law students, and the legal professionals out there in the world?
My piece of advice is to know yourself and to really just pay attention to who you are, what drives you, and let that never leave your mind. In other words, always be there for people and always be there for yourself first and foremost.
Colin, I couldn't agree more. It's beautifully said, but that's the podcast. That's all we have here. So, Colin, thank you so much for coming on here, spreading your wisdom, spreading your experiences. And for everyone out there listening, thank you for tuning in. And be sure, check us out, lawyersinthemaking.substack.com. Lawyers in the Making, one word, substack.com. And I will see you all in the next one.